Good evening, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour years and years ago, about 4 of them, to help everybody stay connected around the virtual campfire. And we've been coming back pretty much every Wednesday since because it's so much fun. We'd also like to thank SIFLA for the Givers Fund grant, which is helping us keep the virtual campfire burning and my metaphors trained. Actually, I do that part on my own. But welcome back, listeners, watchers, to those of you who are returning, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. As always, we have 2 writers reading their own speculative work. Tonight's readers are José Pablo Iriarte and Adeena Mignona. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. If you are joining us on Facebook, we are really happy to have you, but we may not be there for your lively conversation. We'll check back as soon as we can, we promise. But our first reader tonight is José Pablo Iriarte, who has been to Story Hour many times. José Pablo Iriarte is a Cuban-American writer and teacher who lives in Central Florida. Their short fiction has been selected for inclusion in numerous years' best anthologies, including Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy 2022 and Transcendent 4, the year's best transgender speculative fiction. I gotta say, that is the best title. Their novelette, The Substance of My Lives, The Accidents of Our Births, was a Nebula Award finalist for 2018 and longlisted for the Otherwise, formerly Tiptree Award, while their short story Proof by Induction was a finalist for the Nebula and Locus Awards and is currently a finalist for the Hugo and Sturgeon Awards. Their debut novel is slated for publication in spring of 2024 from Knopf Books for Young Readers, an imprint of Penguin Random House. José serves on the board of directors of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. That would be the SIFLA I mentioned earlier, but I don't think that they actually have anything to do with the Givers Fund. And their longer work is represented by Donald Moss Literary Agency. Learn more at labyrinthrat.com or follow José on Twitter at labyrinthrat. José Pablo Iriarte, welcome back to Story Hour.
Thank you so much for inviting me back and for having me on tonight. Just going to tweak the biography, a couple things there. We time traveled.
The old one, isn't it? I
Yeah,
apologize.
and that's on me. I should have provided you with a newer one. So yeah, I did indeed lose that, Hugo.
As many wonderful people do every year.
All right. So the book that I've got coming out in 6 weeks, but who's counting? Is a middle grade book, and I hope that you enjoy stories that are friendly to younger readers. I sure do, and so I figured I would share with you, not that book, obviously, but a short story that was originally published in, I keep drawing a blank, in Cast of Wonders, which is
lovely.
An online magazine geared towards young adult readers. This is a story called Secrets and Things That We Don't Say Out Loud. Secrets and Things We Don't Say Out Loud. And I am sucking on a lozenge because it just came down with a sore throat in the last 24 hours.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So if hopefully I won't choke in the middle of my reading, but if I do, that's why. Anyway, I'm just going to jump on in. There is an Easter egg in this story for anybody who's familiar with Central Florida. And if time permits, you can ask me to point it out afterward. So here we go. Blame cabin fever. I don't usually do stupid things. I'm not supposed to leave the motel room while Kathleen is out looking for stuff she can resell at the flea market. Not if I want to avoid being sent back to the lab. The homeschool worksheets she leaves for me are stupid, though, and nothing is on TV. I've been in this town, Anderson or Henderson or some other last name, for weeks without seeing anything, at least nothing beyond what I could spot through the room's only window, or on trips with Kathleen to the grocery store half a mile down Route 81. I figure it won't hurt anything if I hike over to the Gas and Go and buy some chips or something with $1 that I found in the laundry room yesterday. Only, it turns out you can hardly buy anything with a single dollar. I spent forever in the store's four cluttered aisles, checking price stickers and trying to figure out tax in my head. I glance at the register, and the old man up front is gone. Uh-oh. There's one thing I've learned while on the run with Kathleen, is that you don't get much warning when trouble's about to hit. Maybe it's time to scram. A whiff of too strong cologne is my only warning that it's too late. Not so fast, boy, he says, stepping out from between two aisles and grabbing my arm as I head toward the door. You think I don't see you there shoplifting? What? I didn't steal anything. I try to pull away, but the old man's grip is like iron. Do I look stupid? 90 degrees outside and you're walking around here with a jacket and gloves? What's in your pockets? He yanks on my hoodie right as I lurch away, tugging my jacket halfway off. He reaches for me with his other hand, and I watch it coming from my bare arm for what feels like a minute. A full minute swimming in jello, too slow to get away. Stop! I cry out uselessly. His hand contacts my elbow, and his secrets pour into me. Faking sickness to avoid the draft. Calling his daughter a disappointment when she drops out of nursing school. Sighing with relief when his wife finally passes on after a long illness. I see he'd give anything for another day with her, and that he misses his daughter. She runs a tattoo parlor somewhere in town called Lakeside Shoppies, but she might as well be on Mars. But when the gates open, they open in both directions. He sees my father leaving because he couldn't face a kid who knew all his lies. My mother giving me to the government men who wanted to learn what made me tick. Dr. Lakeland, Kathleen, giving up her whole career to free me. And he learns about the reward for information leading to my rescue from my kidnapper. A reward that might just be enough to retire on. The old man, Enrique, staggers back. What are you? It's not the first time someone's asked that. I'm not a thief, for one thing. I pull my jacket back on. Demon, he says. Freak. Stay right there. He hesitates when he reaches out to grab me, though, and in a flash, I am beyond his grasp and out the door. I pull out my burner phone as I run, and I call the only number in my speed dial. Dr. Lakeland. Jake, what's wrong? Kathleen, You're supposed to call me Mom. Nobody's listening. Keep up the cover or you'll slip when it counts. Kathleen's secret is that's not the real reason she wants me to call her mom. My secret is that I will never think of her that way. But neither of us really has any secrets from the other, just things we don't say out loud. I've been clocked, I say. A moment passes. What happened? I reach the motel as I recount the story. Taking the stairs two at a time, I pant the words. Meet me in front of the Bilo, she says, sounding grim. 15 minutes. And Jake. I slide the key into the door and step through. What? Don't go back to the motel. I block the swinging door before it clicks shut. Okay. I'm serious. Okay. Good. See you in 15. It's not a lie, precisely. She said not to go back to the room. She didn't say anything about already being here. Anyway, I'm leaving as soon as I get one thing. I step to the nightstand beside my bed and grab the book I was reading. I'm only about halfway through, but if I brought it with me, Kathleen would know I came back here. I didn't come for the book. I'm here for the bookmark. The happiest day I remember is the day before my mother turned me over to the scientists. The previous few months had been rough. My father left, and then there were doctor visits to figure out what was wrong with me. I was so dumb I hadn't yet figured out I was supposed to hide my ability. That day, though, Mom took me to Carowinds. She let me choose everything, what to ride, what to eat, what games to play. We stayed until closing, got a hotel room nearby. I couldn't remember ever sleeping in a hotel before, and she let me stay up to watch a movie on cable. I figured she'd decided I was okay, that it didn't matter that I knew people's secrets, that she loved me anyhow. I thought things were about to get better. The next morning, as she packed me into a car with two strangers, She hugged me and told me I was only going to spend a few days with them. Maybe she meant that. Maybe the lab people wouldn't let her take me back. Or she got in a car accident and died. Or she got amnesia and forgot she had a son in a lab somewhere. Maybe she wore a long sleeve hoodie because she was cold. I take a ragged breath. There's no time for this. I run my thumb along the edge of the book until the wrinkled and faded Carowinds ticket slips out, and I stuff it into my pocket. I burst through the motel room door only to freeze at the sight of a police cruiser pulling into the parking lot 3 stories down. What are the odds it's there looking for me? The old man in the store knows where we're staying, of course, but I figured he would take a while to figure out who to call. The government suits would also take time to scramble up a team and send them down here. A second cruiser pulls in, and that is answer enough. I struggle to breathe, as if somebody punched my gut. My phone slips from my hand as I tug it from my back pocket and tumbles to the concrete floor. I dive to keep it from falling through the metal railing to the pavement below. It's in pieces, but this cheap burner phone isn't actually very fragile. I snap the elastic mouthpiece back onto its hinge and crawl away from the railing as I power it back on and press send. Her voice is no nonsense, crisp. What? The police are here. Where? I swallow. The room. I hear her sigh. Are they right outside the door? No, downstairs. One of the deputies steps out of her car and strides toward the office. Can you reach the first hiding place? Every time we check into a new hotel, Kathleen takes me around and points out escape routes and bolt holes. The first hiding place is a storage room under the stairs. It has 2 doors, and if you lift a bit and pull both knobs at the same time, the deadbolt slides out. Unfortunately, that's right by the office. I can't. Okay. What about the other one? The other spot is a ladder leading through a hole in the ceiling onto the roof. I'd be cornered, but out of sight. Yeah, but if you can't get away, hide. I'll do something. I sprint to the side of the building where the access ladder is. Every rung reverberates like a gong, but in a few seconds, I am sliding the heavy plywood cover out of my way. I pull myself onto the flat roof, next to an air conditioning unit. There is no shade. Between the July sun beating down and the hot exhaust from the AC units, I am roasting. I don't know how long I can take it. That's a lie. I'll take it as long as I need to. I creep to the edge. Down below, the second deputy returns to his car. I hold still, hoping he'll leave, but instead, he talks into his radio and taps on the computer on his dashboard. Where's the first cop? A third patrol car pulls into the lot. I crouch on the rooftop, hyperventilating. This isn't a big town, but it's big enough to have a police helicopter or two. The sun is low in the sky, but it's not yet dusk, and there's no way anybody who checks up here will miss me. Blaring radio music distracts me, and I peer down at the brown hatchback screeching into the lot. I stare at the window. It looks like Kathleen behind the wheel. Of course, we both know how to hotwire a car, but what on earth is she doing? In the passenger seat is a kid? Something about the passenger's movements as Kathleen barrels over a and makes the world's worst backward K-turn, peeling out loudly. 2 police cruisers fire up their sirens and take off after her, and they all disappear from my view. Okay, she's drawn off all but one cop. It's only a matter of time before they are back, and with federal reinforcements. I run back to the hole leading off the roof and slip down to the landing. I can't see the first deputy, so I rush downstairs, swinging over the railing when there are just a handful of steps left. In a minute, I'm on street level, looking up at this open door of our room. Hopefully, whoever propped it open is still in there. In the distance, a truck backfires. At least, I pray that's what I'm hearing. Then another one. It's a busy state road in front of the motel. Probably lots of trucks backfire, even though I've never heard one before. I should check it out. No, I shouldn't. Kathleen risked herself to give me an opportunity to get away from here. I stopped running. Running stands out. I turn at the next corner, not even knowing what's down this street. I turn again when I reach another corner and then again, zigzagging away from the hotel and biting my lip to keep from sobbing. Get away now. Freak out later. Once the sun sets, I lose any sense of which way is east or west. Walk, turn, trudge, turn, hobble. I feel like I've been wandering forever. The Bilo. That's where Kathleen said to meet her. Only, how do I find it? And when I do, will she be there? Has she been captured or my brain won't finish the thought. Find the Bilo. Nothing else exists in the world besides the Bilo and the road I'm on and the people that I need to avoid. The little road spits me out onto a busy stretch of highway. Several hundred feet away, I see a marker. Route 81. Thank goodness. I pick a direction and I start walking. A short eternity later, the lit sign for the Bilo appears on the horizon, and a weight lifts off my chest. Immediately, a new one takes its place. Kathleen won't be there, or the government people will. Only now, with a meeting point in sight, do I notice how tired and sore and smelly I am. Finally, I make it to the parking lot and I scan for something. In the darkness, under a burnt out streetlight, I find what I'm looking for. The hatchback from before, or at least one that looks like it. A familiar silhouette sits in the front. When I walk up, I see what appears to be a mannequin lying in the back seat. I open the passenger door with a creak. The sound makes me freeze, but nobody comes running out of the darkness or blinds us with spotlights, so I guess we're in the clear for now. She barely acknowledges me when I climb inside. I know, I say. I messed up. I am so... She holds up a hand. Not now. We'll talk later. Have to abandon this car. Hold up. Her eyes close in a long blink. Best bet is try get out of town. Hope they don't find the car right away. Something about her voice isn't right, and her words, try get out of town? That's not how Kathleen talks. She is precise, each word as carefully measured as the contents of a test tube. The pounding in my chest starts again. I reach for the dome light. Don't! Nobody's watching us, or we'd already be in custody. I ignore her and I click it on. Her hands are covered in rust, and so is her shirt. Not rust, blood. I think to the backfire noises. She's been shot. What were the local cops told to make them open fire on her? You need a doctor. She shakes her head and reaches weakly for the light. I turn it off for her. Can't. Hospitals report all shooting victims. I'm okay. No bones broken, no artery hit, or I'd be dead by now. My insides shrivel up. It's just luck that she's not dead. All because I got bored. She straightens like she's been saving her strength, and now is the time to use it. And then she starts the car and pulls the gear shift into drive. I study her face as she turns onto the driveway, diagonal bands of light from the street passing across her. She may be alive, but she's not okay. She clenches a bit every time she hits a bump in the road or a lane reflector. She's hitting a lot of lane reflectors. She isn't up to this. Should I try to drive? She's taught me how, but I'd need her agree to let me, and I'd stand out behind the wheel. I stare out the window as if the answer is out there. I take everything in without paying attention to anything. Familiar red and yellow arches, lakeside shoppies, a Family Dollar. Wait, lakeside shops. Pull in here. Why? I stop myself before the words trust me tumble out of my mouth. Because you're not driving well, I say. She's a scientist, or at least she was before she gave that up for me. She respects facts. There's somebody here who can help us. Who? Pull over. She frowns, but turns into the shopping center, grunting from the exertion. Now what? I scan the strip mall, looking for something familiar that I've never laid eyes on. There, I point. Bella's tattoo studio. She gives me a side eye but heads toward the studio. An open sign glows above the front door. Kathleen pulls into a spot several rows back where there are no cars she might damage. She hits the parking block hard. I hurry around to her side and help her out of the car. She may not have hit an artery, but it sure seems like a lot of blood to me. Her shirt looks like a zombie tie-dye, and her hand is red like she's been finger painting. She leans on me, and I practically carry her. A chime inside the door tinkles when I pull it open, and I'm hit by the scent of disinfectant. I guess I expected incense or something, but this place smells more like a dentist's office. The walls are painted pea green, and black metal ceiling fans turn slowly overhead. One wall is taken up by framed examples of artwork. Four seats that look like dentist chairs or massage tables sit empty in the middle of the floor. I scan for the girl in Enrique's memory, Isabel. After a moment, I realize the woman reading a magazine behind the counter is her. "We close in 10 minutes," she says, without looking up at first. "Make an appointment. You can't swoop in here right before—" What the hell? I meet her eyes. "You're Isabel, right? We need your help." "The name's Bella." She glances at Kathleen and swallows. "And what you need is a hospital." I shake my head. "We can't. Whatever kind of trouble you're in is trouble I don't need." "We haven't done anything wrong. I know you used to be a nurse. You can help us." Her eyebrows punch together. "How do you know anything about me?" I stare at the wood grain on the floor. "From your father." "My father sent you?" Bull. "It's complicated. Look, we don't have time to argue." "What I don't have time for is her bleeding all over my shop." She picks up the phone. "I'm calling 911. "Don't." I rush across the waiting area, yanking my right glove off as I go. Kathleen sags without my support. I try not to think about that as I slap my hand around Bella's wrist. Again, the walls fall down. Bella's secret is that her son was born premature and she blames herself. Bella's secret is that she wishes she had somebody to confide in. Bella's secret is that she's not as tough as she pretends to be. My secret is that I knew my mother was never coming back to me. My secret is that anybody can lie to me if I really want to believe what they're saying. My secret is I'm as capable of lying to myself as anybody. She pulls away with a gasp. "What did you do to me?" "Now you understand. The people who want me are powerful. They would kill Dr. Lakeland. They can tell the cops anything and the cops will believe them and do what they say. Please, we need your help." She swallows and glances deeper into the shop. "Let's get her on the table in the back. I can't promise that I can help, but I'll take a look." She stands and crosses to the front door. "It's closing time anyway," she mutters as she locks it and draws the blinds shut. I help her carry Kathleen, trying to ignore how her breath catches with nearly every step. The back room has another massage chair, and we drag her onto it. After tugging on gloves, Bella lifts the side of Kathleen's shirt, which is stiff with drying blood. Kathleen chokes off a whimper when Bella prods her side. "Good news is it's basically a graze," Bella says. She meets Kathleen's eye. "Patching it's still going to hurt, though." "Can't you give her something?" Bella steps to a cabinet and tosses me a bottle of Advil. "Kid, you're the one that brought her into a tattoo shop. We don't do general anesthesia." I hand the pills to Kathleen, who digs out four and swallows them dry. Bella douses gauze in hydrogen peroxide and dabs at the wound. When she makes contact, Kathleen cries out. It hurts me just to hear it. Bella pauses and stares up at the ceiling. I'm about to ask what she's waiting for when I hear a pulsing outside. A helicopter. My mouth dries. Thankfully, we did not park right in front of Bella's shop. Bella swallows and picks up a spool of plastic thread. She uncoils about an arm's length and wipes it down with a square of gauze doused in rubbing alcohol. "All I've got is some fishing line we use to help people hide piercings. This is not the fine stuff doctors use. It's going to hurt like hell. and leave a wicked scar. She unwraps a needle, threads it with the fishing line, and steps toward the table. Kathleen clenches her teeth, but she still screams when the needle pokes through. My chest aches. People will hear, I say, feeling like a jerk. I'm trying, she gasps. Bella begins again. Again, Kathleen cries out. Without thinking, I slap a hand over her mouth. Bella continues stitching while Kathleen wails against my hand. I thought she had no more secrets, but they pour into me all the same. Kathleen's secret is that she would do it all again. Her secret is that she thinks she's not strong enough. You're the strongest person I know, I say, my eyes brimming. My secret is there's a reason I try not to think about why she's given up so much for me. My secret is that if I did, I'd have to think about how much more she's cared about me than my own flesh and blood have. I keep my hand on her mouth until Bella finishes. When I finally let go, all Kathleen does is pant. She needs to rest, Bella says, tidying up. In the meantime, I should go home, or I might draw attention. She turns off the light. Don't turn anything on. After 2 years on the run, I don't need to be told this, but Bella is just trying to help. I don't need to touch her to understand that. Got it, I reply. We sit in silence after she leaves. I have 1,000 things I want to say, but instead I listen as Kathleen's breathing evens out. Once she's asleep, I pad to a couch in the outer room. I'm sure I'm not sleeping tonight, but I try to rest anyway, so I can focus tomorrow. I startle awake at the sound of a train horn in the distance. I lurch upright, shoving a ratty blanket to the floor. It's okay, kid. Across from me, Bella is pretzeled into an armchair, her head resting on her hand. What time is it? 12:15. She nods toward the counter. I brought donuts. My stomach rumbles. I grab a filled donut and bite down, lemon jelly erupting into my mouth. Powdered sugar dusts my t-shirt. Whatever. It's not like I was clean before. Thanks, I mumble around a mouthful. I don't mean for the donut. She nods and then sits there, looking at me. It's kind of creepy. What? She gave up a lot to take you away from that lab, huh? My eyes flick to the back room. Yeah? Maybe if my old man had cared that much, we'd have a relationship now. I pull the old Carowinds ticket from my pocket and run my fingers along a crease. I glance at Bella. I've seen your father's thoughts. He cares about you a lot. I wonder what I would see if I touched my mom today. Would I be on her mind? Bella shrugs. Yeah, well, he could have been better at showing it. We can't all be psychics. Well, you know now. She shrugs. So maybe I'll call him. Maybe we'll talk. I don't reply to that. We sit in silence, Bella looking at something on her phone, me turning the amusement park ticket over and over. I'm glad Bella will have a chance to talk to her father. He's not young. Then again, Bella is not the one who almost lost somebody today. I get up, cross over the counter, and drop the ticket into the wastebasket. Bella and I help Kathleen out to the service parking behind the strip mall. You sure about this? I ask. They won't be looking for my car, Bella replies. I'll wait a couple days and then I'll report it stolen. Kathleen squeezes her hand. We can't thank you enough. I'd say pay it forward, but I think you already are. Bella replies, but she's looking at me, not Kathleen. She unlocks the door and we ease Kathleen into the driver's seat. We're going to have to break the steering column if we want your story to be believable. Bella shrugs. It's a crap car anyway. She puts a hand on my shoulder over my t-shirt. Take care, she says. She waits outside while we hotwire her car. Once we pull away, I watch her in the passenger mirror until a turn puts her out of view. I stare at the mirror long after she's gone, watching this town back away from us. We'll get as far as we can in the next day or so, ditch this car and take a Greyhound, and start all over again in some other place, some other motel room. Maybe this time I won't screw everything up. Kathleen shifts in her seat. The last day or so is kind of a blur. I try to imagine how much pain she is feeling. I am so sorry. I'm proud of you, Jake. I blink. Proud? For what? For almost getting her killed? It looks like you took care of a lot these last few hours, she says. I turn toward her, noticing for the first time the small changes that a couple of years on the run have made. Lines on her face that weren't there when I met her, touches of silver in her hair. She isn't the same person who took me from the lab that night. And I guess I'm not the same person either. Thanks, Mom.
Say, I love that.
Thank you so much.
Very enjoyable story with, just plain enjoyable and also meaningful. But I also like that it's not talking down to kids.
Mm.
I appreciate that. How old is Jake in the story? I may have missed that.
In my head, I would put him at around 12 or 13.
That's what I was hearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So since this is for a YA publication, is he a little older than Benny Ramirez from your upcoming book?
So Benny is 12.
Benny is 12. Okay.
Yeah. So I know that the magazine will get very irritated if you describe them as middle grade. They'll say very, no, we're not middle grade. And so I just kind of keep quiet about the fact that in my head this story is middle grade.
Well, I think that this is in some ways what I'm used to thinking of young adult as. Young adult has gotten a lot more mature themed in recent years. It's been skewing
Oh,
a
it's
lot
middle grade
older.
actually. Yeah.
I kind of wish we
Um,
could divide it out. I feel like the manga divisions for younger teen and older teen are actually better than young adult and middle grade.
I find though that as that's happened, that's created a little bit of a gap there. And so middle grade has kind of separated into upper middle grade and lower middle grade. And I would say that 10, 15 years ago, I didn't find as much middle grade as I enjoyed. There was a space that I could write in as I do now. It felt to me, I'm not putting it down, I'm just saying it wasn't me
Mhm.
as a reader. It felt to me like middle grade 15 years ago, give or take, tended to be either more didactic, like outwardly
Mhm.
didactic, or zany. And I'm seeing a space for middle grade that's a little bit more nuanced than that now. And I think it's kind
Right.
of that gap.
Yeah, because this one was, action packed and tense, but it was also very thoughtful and meaningful, and that's something you don't always get to explore a lot with the really
Mhm.
younger readers.
Yeah. I
So
think it's a really good time for middle grade.
I think that's great. And so we can expect this kind of tone from Benny Ramirez?
Benny Ramirez is a lot more funny. I'd never really been asked to write anything funny before. And so that was something kind of new that I discovered in myself when writing that book. But if you've read a lot of my work, I do tend to be known for trying to pack a lot of feelings into the story. And I would say that Benny Ramirez does that as well. It's not really action-packed. It's more hijinks, funny hijinks.
But that sounds great too. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And the link is there in the Zoom and on Facebook as well if you want to check out the publisher's write-up for Benny Ramirez and let me make sure I'm getting this right. Benny Ramirez and the Nearly Departed. I love that. That's great. So thank you very much, everybody.
Hey.
Jose Pablo Iriarte, reading some to give you a preview of what something of the feel of his upcoming middle grade book. And in between, we like to take a moment to just sort of let one story sink in and ready for the next one. We have a little more of a transition than usual this time, which is always fun. Um, we're going to be going to a much more adult piece, although not exactly adult content for the next one. We're going to be seeing Adeena Mignona read for us.
Yes.
So Adeena, by day, Adeena is a mission architect with 25 years and counting in aerospace, specializing in the software and systems engineering for a variety of different kinds of satellites and human spaceflight. By night, she's the author of the 4-book Robot Galaxy series and your co-host of the Big Sci-Fi podcast. Her blog is the love child of hard science and science fiction, spiced with humor. She's also a mentor, STEM speaker, and mom of future astronauts. If her 6-year-old self could see her now, she'd say Adeena is almost cool enough to live on the moon. If only someone would say that about all of us, right? Adeena, welcome to Story Hour. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I need to update my bio too because it mentions my Robot Galaxy series, but not my most recent book, Lunar Logic, which just came out. That's my bad for not
Lunar Logic, is
including
that a cover I see behind you?
That is the cover of Lunar Logic that you see behind me.
Nice.
It's available in all the places in paperback and digital, and at the moment, it's getting recorded for audio. The individual recording it, his name is Bruce Horak, and he was recently in Star Trek Strange New Worlds playing Chief Engineer Hemmer.
Oh, how
And so he's recording it. Oh, it is. And actually, before I got on this evening, I was listening. I have to listen to all of it to make sure it's all correct and everything.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. It's amazing.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And I'm sorry about letting the bios get outdated. This is what happens when you book people months in advance. Maybe we should.
No, it's
right.
Yep. It's funny. Yeah, and so I guess the explanation or the content warning of my story, it's barely adult, in the sense of I let my 13-year-old listen to me read this. It has a couple curse words in it, and there is some sort of death by suicide, but in a heroic manner.
Okay.
So like barely. And it's interesting because so my Lunar Logic book and my Robot Galaxy series, which is where I'm pointing right there, there's not, even though all of those books are meant for adults, there's no content there that kids can't read. There's no curse words in there. There's no adult content. So I call that stuff safe for kids, although several other people say it's young adult. And it's just kind of funny how other people perceive these things,
right. These
and what we
terms are
intended.
so squidgy.
Yeah.
So, all right. I think that what's just important is that we know that we're moving from a definite kid targeted story to one that might need parental guidance. Might be
yes.
So great. Let's hear it.
Okay. The name of the story is called Final Orbit. Today is supposed to be my last day on the International Space Station. I've been here for 268 days, 2 months longer than expected. Same as my crewmates, Elle and Chris. So I should say it's our last day on the ISS. I just need to tell them I'm not returning with them. All that's left are beef enchiladas, Elle called out, and a lot of extra hot sauce. I think one entire cargo transfer bag on the last emergency resupply mission had nothing but those packets in it. She looked at me across the short and oddly inclined galley table. Her look said, "Sorry, didn't mean to mention it." Again. But how could she not? Our life for the last 2 months was dominated by us not being able to return to Earth as scheduled, but instead stay here until the last possible minute. And no matter what they said, I knew they were both thinking it. It was my fault. I spent the first month cleaning up all the computer systems, spent this last month figuring out if I got all the malicious code out, spent this last week fearful that I hadn't, and finally spent the last 2 days wanting to tell my crewmates I decided I needed to remain aboard. But I didn't, because I didn't want to disrupt their focus. That was the lie I told myself. I didn't tell them because I didn't want them to talk me out of it. "Dib, you in?" Elle held up a packet of food. I nodded and she floated it over to me. "Give me one too," Chris said as he floated down from the Russian side of the station. "I'll confirm with Houston, again, that everything's good in Zvezda." Chris used one hand to find a handhold along the wall and effortlessly slipped his feet into 2 footholds to stop his momentum. Elle launched a packet of food his way, and he grabbed it. No zombies? Elle asked Chris. Chris chuckled. Nope. Same as yesterday, same as the day before. The concern was that the Russians either left something behind that would activate once they were gone, or there was a communications backdoor for them to transmit something malicious from the ground. Although it wasn't their fault we were here, when the cyber attack happened, on my watch, they were eager to help find the culprits. Everyone was a little suspicious of everyone. Relations hadn't been great over the years. But after working with them for so long as I had, it was easy to see that they had as much pride in the ISS as we did. We were lucky that China, wanting to embarrass us and scare off some of the smaller countries from working with us on future missions, claimed responsibility. Emphasis on claimed. I never thought they were responsible, and neither did a lot of my management. Still, the cyber attack happened on my watch. Yes, I've been beating myself up about it ever since the day it happened. We were 2 days away from departing. To great fanfare and a live broadcast, we were going to be the last 3 on the International Space Station, the most amazing science laboratory for the last 3 decades. Our return capsule was packed and ready with the last bits of stuff we could bring back home. I was in the cupola taking pictures when an alarm sounded. We had trained over and over for all the alarms, and every now and then we get a false smoke detector alarm. But this one was new. It was installed in an upgraded computer system only 2 years earlier. It was the cyber alarm. NASA had been fielding numerous threats against the station, and while over the decades had been upgrading all their software systems to comply with modern secure coding practices, the station was a little trickier. But I had helped design the system. Before I was an astronaut, I was a software engineer, and cyber was my specialty. I had always wanted to work on space stuff. I once joked that I would sweep the floors if only I could work on programs related to the space station and space exploration. One thing led to another, and while early in my career, I had done a little mechanical design, a little electronics, software engineering was what I was best at. And more things led to each other, which led to me applying to the astronaut program, never thinking about the ISS, but thinking I would be part of the pool of astronauts that would be selected for the Artemis missions, the return to the moon and on to Mars. Instead, NASA sent me here, dangling the carrot that I was still young enough that this experience would be worthwhile to anyone going on to the moon or Mars. So I accepted. My mission specialty was software and computers and understanding the complex systems that had been Frankenstein together over the years to create this unique laboratory. But that alarm, the cyber warning, blared throughout the station. I dropped the camera, and by that I mean I let go of it and let it float in the cupola. It was tethered to the wall, so it floated until it hit the end of its leash. But I didn't have time to see it as I rushed, my hands doing the work of pulling me along the walls, handhold over handhold, until I reached the Unity module. I pulled down the keyboard that had been stowed. The small screen came to life, and I tapped away, dismissing the graphical user interface and opening up my command line interface. I looked for processes and activities that weren't supposed to be there. It wasn't easy to find at first. The cyber attacker knew what they were doing. There was no time to think, just do, and what I did was shut down as much computing as possible to prevent whatever code from spreading. If we had had more time, or more funding, I could have deployed one or more AI-enabled algorithms that was doing what I was doing now. They would have been more efficient and possibly even more thorough than me, but those ideas were shot down long ago. Not enough time to test, I was told. That's TRL2 stuff, my manager told me. My manager used the technology rating levels, TRL, at least once in every conversation I'd ever had since I'd known him. And no one is paying to take something at such a low technology readiness level right now to human-rated TRL 9 for the space station. But then we'll have it for the moon and Mars, I had argued. That argument got me nowhere, since the teams that made decisions for the ISS and moon and even Mars were separate entities that didn't always collaborate the way they should. So here I was, tapping away, doing a job an AI should have been deployed to do. And I was losing. The code had spread. Hard power down as many computers as possible, I shouted to Elle and Chris, who had showed up only seconds after I'd started going to war against whoever was attacking us. There's something spreading, and that's the only way we can stop it. For the moment, for the duration of this emergency, I was in charge, and they both knew it, so neither questioned my command, and they started executing it right away. That's it, I said, less than 10 minutes later. It's damage assessment time. Mission Control is calling, Chris called out. Chris was our mission commander, and one of the things he did once he showed up in Unity was to put on the nearest set of headphones. I closed my eyes and started to feel the adrenaline subside, leaving me with a headache. Luckily, we had plenty of meds for that. Needless to say, we didn't return to Earth on time. Instead, an extra resupply capsule was sent up with additional food and supplies to make sure we had plenty for the extra 2 months we were here. Hey, look at it this way, Elle said in one of the moments she found me brooding alone in the cupola. We get to send more stuff down to Earth, more knickknacks for the museums. And we did. We spent some time selecting and packing. We sent books, toys, a lot of the stuff that had been left here mission after mission and used by the 200 and something. I could never remember exactly how many astronauts lived here over the years. People as props and gimmicks to get young kids into STEM and excited about space. I was one of those who tried to get kids interested. Early in my mission, NASA sponsored a live Zoom call with my old high school. I told the kids all about my career, how I was always in love with space, having watched the tail end of the space shuttle missions when I was a kid. I always knew I wanted to work in space, but up until a few years ago, that meant writing software for spacecraft that others would get to fly. I thought I was earthbound. I was never traditional astronaut material, but I was smart and worked hard. NASA loved it when I told that story. It made it seem like anyone who was smart and worked hard could do what I do and wind up as an astronaut. And they needed everyone to believe that. Support for the Moon and Mars missions was not exactly at Apollo levels lately. Give me more hot sauce, Chris said. Elle obliged by floating Chris some packets. Chris caught them one by one. I still hadn't opened my beef enchilada. More, he said. Look, it's never spicy enough, and anything we don't use is getting burned up later today anyway. Elle noticed I hadn't touched my food. Dib, are you going to eat that? Yeah, in a few, I said, and took a deep breath. Now is probably the best time to lay it on them. Guys, Commander? I looked at Chris. He knew I was about to say something serious given I invoked the rarely used Commander title on him. Chris and Elle's eyes were all fixed on me, and Chris even let a hot sauce packet get away. I'm staying, I blurted out, without making eye contact with either of them. There was a moment where no one was said anything, but I still felt their eyes on me. Then I heard Chris let out the breath he was holding and start to laugh. Good one, Dib. Here, you're going to need some hot sauce with that. I let the packet he tossed me float on by. I'm serious, I said, this time making eye contact with Chris to hopefully transmit my message a little better. I'm not leaving with you today. I'm going to stay. Elle looked at Chris, then at me. But, she said slowly, cut off by Chris raising his hand at her. Dib, NASA is expecting to safely return 3 astronauts, the last 3 astronauts, to Earth today. Fuck, the whole world is. I know the talk we had a couple weeks ago didn't help, and I know you've still been brooding around about the cyber attack, but it wasn't your fault. It's not that, I started, unsure if I should dump everything I wanted to say at once or wait for Chris to ask. Then what is it? And this better be good, because Elle and I will throw you in that return capsule and strap you down if we have to. I took a deep breath. I'd been thinking about this conversation for days. I wanted to have it yesterday, but I knew these guys needed their sleep before today. I think, I began but trailed off. That wasn't the right way to begin. I know. Chris, there's something still in the computers. And it's definitely in the guidance system. I need to stay to make sure that it doesn't disrupt the deorbit burns. Chris didn't say anything immediately. He held on to a handhold and floated, up a few inches and down a few inches, in a form of meditation before he spoke next. I'm going to go call Houston. Both of you stay here. And with that, he pushed off the handhold and grabbed another to turn himself around. He was headed towards Tranquility, the one node where he could have some privacy where he talked to the people on the ground. At the end of the day, or the mission, they couldn't force me into a capsule. So I didn't give 2 or 3 shits what they said or thought. I don't know if Chris cared or not what they thought on the ground, but as commander, he had to at least pretend to care and had a responsibility to make sure they were informed. I made eye contact with Elle. You should still eat, she said, and I could tell she was holding back a range of emotions. Chris and Elle found me hiding at my workstation in Columbus. ESA had told us when their last astronaut left ISS that we could use the space, and so I did, turning it into a makeshift office and computer lab. I had my primary laptop that I hid behind most days. It was my war room in the days after the cyber attack and my fortress of solitude for my brooding sessions, as Chris called them, for weeks after. That was a pretty long conversation with Houston, I started, trying to be non-broody. Yeah, Chris said. He was holding himself steady with one hand on a handhold and pinched the bridge of his nose with another. Elle was perched on an opposite handhold. Her face was too young to have so many visible worry lines. NASA, Chris began. I seriously can't believe this. They don't not agree with you. I parsed the double negative to make sure I heard Chris correctly. I could see Elle was doing the same thing. So they agree with me. Yes and no. Chris took a deep breath before continuing. Yes, they agree that there still could be a problem. No, they don't agree that anyone should remain on board. It's suicide. NASA can't exactly condone that. But they acknowledge that they're down there, we're up here. They can tell us what they want us to do, but I'm the commander. Any final decision on what happens up here is mine to make. It was my turn to let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. So it's settled. I'm staying to ensure safe reentry. Chris shook his head. No, I'm going to stay. That's ridiculous. Elle and I both blurted out at the same time, and then it was impossible to separate what either of us said after because we both started to launch into overlapping reasons. Chris held his free hand up, and we both stopped talking. That's enough, guys. I'm commander of this mission, and I have to make sure my crew is safe. That's both of you, and that the mission completes successfully. Something about the captain going down with the ship and all. Except that you don't know how to counter any Trojan or other cyber nasty hiding in the system, I said. I could tell Chris was working up another argument, but I didn't give him the chance to verbalize it. Besides, Chris, I paused and looked him in the eye once more. Your kids. Fuck, he said, and smacked his hand against the bulkhead. He turned around and left the module, and I could hear him cursing under his breath all the way out. Elle stayed. She looked at me and said, Dib, how sure are you? I know I'm just a resident biologist, but I know my way around a computer or 10, and I haven't seen anything unusual. I cut her off too. I was good at cutting people off lately. Because your systems for all the experiments are just fine. No one had any interest in interfering with growing salad or algae or whatever else is going on there. It's a guidance in the nav system, the entire fault redundant system too. I thought you reinitialized everything, reloaded all the code. I did, I said. But whoever they were knew enough to modify the source copy as well. In fact, I think, and I took a deep breath before continuing, that what they did was put enough in the system to get us to notice, which forced us, or forced me, to copy that source around. I did this, unwittingly, but I did this. So I need to be the one to stay and see this through, make sure it doesn't re-enter over a major city or something. How are you going to do that? I built my own command injector, and these spare laptops, I gestured towards a set of 3 laptops that I had mounted on the wall with Velcro. They've never been connected to the station or anything, so they're clean. I also pulled out the spare inertial measurement unit and GPS receiver. I can get position and attitude data I can trust from them and inject thrust commands to change our attitude and orientation from here. Elle looked at the laptops and then back at me. So you're going to use a makeshift, unqual-tested, non-certified system to make sure this boat lands in the Pacific. That's the general idea. And there's no other way? Elle, I've been thinking about this for weeks. Chris called it brooding. I call it thinking and planning. Chris and Elle left. To make up for the kilos that I wasn't going to be taking up in the capsule, we put in 71 kilos of stuff that included the espresso maker and my favorites from what was left of the library. Make sure they name the collection after me, was what I said as if it was my last will and testament, which it kind of was. I helped make sure that the capsule was sealed up, and moments later, the autonomous undocking began as I monitored from the Harmony module. I didn't say anything to Chris and Elle, but I was worried that the code that controlled the autonomous undocking was also compromised. I tried to imagine the attackers, the cyber criminals, the terrorists. Their goal was to have the ISS crash into some populated area. Getting a couple of astronauts killed first wasn't the way to go, since everyone would be on high alert and possibly alter plans. Although they imagined all three of us were on that capsule and no one left behind to mind the store, then maybe we were, in fact, a target too. Turned out that the undocking was boring and routine. I watched the telemetry indicate that each hook and latch popped open exactly in the right order. The computer that displayed telemetry to me also had a view of the capsule from an outside camera. I saw the little puff of exhaust that pushed the capsule slowly away. When the capsule was nearly 40 meters away and it appeared as a tiny speck in the camera view I had, I saw the first larger separation burn execute right on time. There were going to be several more burns, but everything was going to be fine, I told myself. I didn't have much to do but wait for a while. Several days earlier, I recorded video messages to some friends and family. I sent one to my parents and a separate one to my brother. I hadn't been terribly close to any of them, and none of them were terribly impressed by the fact that I was an astronaut. In fact, my parents were disappointed that it seemed to be yet another reason why I hadn't given them grandchildren. Typical. Those messages were sent to a server that allowed me to schedule when they would be released to the intended recipient, which would be later today. I had another 4 hours before I needed to think about reentry. 3 of those were taken up by monitoring Chris and Elle's trip back to Earth. They would orbit the Earth one last time and then position for a water landing in the Atlantic, not too far off the coast of Florida. Before they left, Chris made me promise I'd get on comms with Houston and stay on with them the whole ride down. I promised. We didn't say much other in the way of goodbyes. No one said, see you later, since obviously that wasn't going to happen. We shook hands, we hugged. Chris said, good luck. Elle said, fingers crossed. And the last thing I saw of their faces through their helmets were forced smiles. I'd retreated to my office in Columbus and had a headset on. NASA was broadcasting the return trip, and I was able to watch. They told us they'd broadcast all the way through retrieving the capsule, but they wouldn't show the opening. They hadn't yet announced that only 2, not 3, people were on board and were still figuring out the right way to do that. I saw the parachutes deploy, all 4 of them, and then a big splash. The capsule was then floating, and the parachutes landed gently nearby. The NASA announcer was declaring success when I turned it off and flipped a switch, activating my comms to Houston. Houston, ISS. ISS, this is Houston. Dib, it's Casey. So you're the last voice I'll hear, huh? Only the best with love from NASA to you, baby. Casey had been my best friend during our time training as astronauts together. He was 1 mission before me and was slated to be on one of the lunar crews. His brag was well-deserved. He was top of the class with everything he did, but he did it in such a way that seemed to help you out as well, which made us all love him. And in case I don't get to say this later, he added, thank you, Dib. Sincerely, thank you. You're welcome? There's been some information passed around, he said, and I could tell he lowered his tone so not to broadcast what he was saying to the entire control room behind him. He sighed. L.A., he said. L.A., I repeated, at my normal volume since there was no one else around to hear my side of our conversation. It took a minute, but I processed what he was saying. L.A., Los Angeles. That was the target. How sure are they? I asked. Pretty confident. Jeez, yeah, he said. He couldn't say much more, but I could. I just needed some more data first. One of the laptops I had opened displayed a map of the Earth overlaid with several interconnected arcs, the sinusoidal curve that traced the ISS's path over the Earth's surface. I switched to that laptop, lifting the keyboard to a better position to type. I opened a dialog, selected Los Angeles, California, USA, as a destination, and then let the program perform some calculations. A few seconds later, I had my answer. Casey, I said, skipping the whole part where I was supposed to call out to Houston and identify myself as ISS first. I think I know when the first attack burn is going to take place. In order to get this thing to break up so the debris lands in LA, that first burn is going to be in about 15 minutes. I know. I could hear the worry in Casey's voice, imagining his friends and family who were in danger, and it wasn't like anyone was about to call an evacuation of Los fucking Angeles. The panic and mayhem would do just as much damage as a piece of debris hitting a building, if not more. Casey was an LA native, growing up in one of the US's space industry hotbeds. Both Casey's parents worked on a satellite manufacturing floor, screwing bolts into multiple Mars rovers, so Casey couldn't help but grow up a space nerd. Look, I've got other calculations running on how best to counter. We have extra fuel that was just going to burn in reentry anyway. Do we know that they don't have a contingency? It's unlikely, I said. After the original cyber attack, we changed comms encryption keys and altered frequencies. They probably don't have any way to command real time like I can. We still didn't know who they were, but if their target was Los Angeles, one of the most populated cities in the US, well, it didn't narrow anything down. During the first week after the attack, I wanted to know who they were so badly. But once China claimed it, everyone simply accepted that. Now, I didn't care. I just wanted to make sure we didn't start a reentry path that would endanger millions of lives. In my head, I pictured it like a movie. It was fitting that the first thing I imagined was a large piece of the ISS, maybe one of the airlocks, crashing into the Hollywood sign. Or the Zvezda service module taking out rides at Disneyland. Or Kibo, the Japanese laboratory, hitting the Chinese theater. I was still at the laptop with the map, running a quick Monte Carlo analysis on a counterburn to the LA crashing scenario one. Not that Monte Carlo analyses were quick on a good day, but I only had a few minutes, not hours, or even another orbit around the Earth. ISS Houston, it was Casey again. Casey, with all the ears on him in the control center, couldn't break protocol. I'm here. Just give me a minute. Dib, let me say it again. He paused briefly to build up emotional gravitas. Thanks. I couldn't respond. There was no time because the analysis had an answer and I had to command the thrusters to nudge our orbit slightly higher and pitch the station's thrust vector up by a few degrees. That would be enough to counter the LA crashing burn, and once that happened, I'd be lined up to take the ISS down into the Pacific, as planned. Executing burn, I said into the mic. I typed in the command for commit to the command I sent, hit enter, and a few seconds later felt the whole ISS jolt. We're tracking that, Casey said. My body tracked the burn too. For a full minute, I could feel a low level of acceleration. I also felt a slight counter jolt when the thrusters turned off. T-minus 2 minutes until that other burn, I said. Then we'd see if we were right. I was right. Not that I ever wanted to be right about this, but if it happened, then it justified my decision to remain here. If it didn't happen, I would have to recalculate and get us back on track and spend the last few minutes of my life wallowing. Those 2 minutes were an eternity. But then there it was. Another jolt. Dib, we're tracking another burn. Was that? That's the one that would have crashed us where no one wanted to crash. Yeah. Dib. I could hear he was a little choked up as he said my name. I didn't say anything. Dib, Casey started again, and I could hear a commotion in the background. It sounded happy. You're a fucking hero. I had time to raid the rest of the medical supplies. I took everything that would make me drowsy. I'd never been much of a drinker, but wished I could have taken a shot of something to go with the medical cocktail. I made sure the final reentry burn executed as planned, and it was the biggest jolt anyone would have ever felt in this bolt. I think one solar array snapped off before it was supposed to, but I was too tired to check the telemetry screen to be sure. They'd be tracking it from the ground. I knew they probably had eyes on me from the ground and from space. The transmitter was still sending all the telemetry it could, and it would up until the antenna fell off or the transmitter melted. Groans came from all the modules of the ISS and echoed through the vehicle. I had turned off audio. I wasn't sure if I'd scream or once I started to melt, so I figured no one on the ground needed to hear that, although the module was more likely to crack open and depressurize before I even had a chance to melt. But I was starting to feel the drowsiness kick in. Oh, thank God. I was worried that maybe I accidentally took a stimulant. I wanted to close my eyes. Nothing stopping me, so I did. The last thing I saw was the map and my trajectory ending in the middle of the Pacific. I held that image in my mind for a minute. I'd always wanted to go to some remote Pacific island. Instead, maybe they'll name one after me. Casey called me a hero. Thud. Was that another solar array that just dislodged? Did it hit part of the station? Normally, we'd be freaking out if something hit us, but this is good, and it's nice and snuggly warm in here. Someone should see what that noise was. I'm starting to feel uncomfortably warm in here. I'm too tired to go adjust the fans. Elle must have turned up the heat a little. I'll talk about her about it later. Now, it's time for me to sleep.
Oh, love that.
So in my day job, I do work on things related. And a coworker of mine is a former astronaut who's had a few missions on the shuttle and the ISS, and he actually reviewed it to make sure I got some of the details correct.
I you know, I have to say I'm so impressed because I'm not a rocket scientist, not a programmer, any of that. And so I can't always follow hard science fiction very well. And I don't always get a lot of emotion out of it. And so to be able to follow the action of this and feel all the emotion was really a special experience.
Thank you. This way I've read it a couple of times to audiences, and I feel like it's one of the better things I've ever written, which is, but it's hard, and I get a little choked up at the end too.
And you know, that's wonderful. It's great that it still works on you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's funny because on the surface of it, we've had two very, very different stories tonight. But, you know, they're both stories that had an initial problem coming from someone pursuing science unethically.
Mhm.
And both of them were written completely without condescension for their audience. And I really appreciate that from both of you. Thank you so much. Well, I at least will be back next week when we'll have two different readers, two completely different readers. We're going to have Maya Beck and Ben Francisco. I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the readings. There and usually Blue Sky are the places where I tend to post any last minute changes, which don't happen very often. And you can also go on to the Story Hour page on Facebook and watch any videos you've missed. Watch this one a few more times. We're happy with all of it. José Pablo Iriarte, Adeena Mignona, thank you so much for reading for us tonight. Those were both very powerful stories, and I appreciate them deeply. Thank you also to my co-host, Daniel Marcus, who is not with us tonight, but will be back. And thank you, all of you in the audience tonight, all of you in the audience at some time in the future, because as long as you come and enjoy these stories, we're all here together in the same story hour. Good night.